Hello and welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. I know I say that every time, but I really mean it and I hope you feel it. I know your time is so valuable and that you could be listening to a lot of other things right now. So, the fact that we're here together and that we're sharing this experience is a magical ritual. It's a ritual practice in and of itself. And so, I don't take that for granted and I don't take you for granted. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Today's show is going to be a real adventure. I have a story for you. So there's going to start out with a story. And then we're going to talk about lesser known aspects of the manifestation process that people don't really talk about, but that are so key for how we are going to shape the world that we live in and how you can affect change in your life. And so I'm going to give you some nuggets of wisdom that I have gained over years and years of doing this work. I think I first started my spiritual development classes at the spiritualist church where I attended back in my late teens, early 20s. And I think my first class, which covered universal law, esotericism, my first class was in, I think, like 1995. So I've been doing this a long time and I've got best practices. I've got things that I wouldn't do again, and I'd be happy to share that with you. This is one of those episodes that I wish we were all here together, sitting in a room talking, because I want to hear from you too. What works for you? What are you struggling with? What aspects of manifestation do you just find ineffective? I think we all have that experience of wanting something, having a desire for something, of doing our rituals, setting our intentions, lighting our candles, all of those things. And then things don't turn out the way we desire. And I know many of us are doing this on a personal level. Manifestation was one of those things that nobody knew, not many people. It wasn't in the mainstream unless you were in select circles. It really wasn't something that we talked about. But now it's ubiquitous. And books like The Secret back in the early 2000s really helped to be the tipping point for that. And so some of us are really working on this in our personal lives and understanding how our thoughts and our attitudes and our beliefs shape our reality. But there are some of us also who are working with this information in our political spheres, in our organizations, businesses, in the way that we fundraise for campaigns or for nonprofits. Some of us are working with these concepts in more of those like collective environments. And so I want to talk about both. The personal is the collective, and the collective is the personal. The microcosm is as the macrocosm. And so we'll get into some of the ins and outs of that. But first, I have a story for you. And this story is the motivating force behind this week's subject matter, this week's episode. I have a very dear friend, one of my best friends. She and I co-teach a class together called Astrology for Creatives. And we call each other our work wives. Like, she's my work wife. I adore her. This is Bonnie Gillespie. And Bonnie is the author of a book called Self Management for Actors. Bonnie has been in the entertainment world, but she's also an astrologer, a brilliant astrologer. And we partnered together on a very fortuitous equinox day. We decided to go ahead and co teach a course together. And so it was this really magical relationship. She and I have always had this really incredible relationship. And we know that there are spiritual forces that have brought us together, and there are spiritual forces that interplay in each other's lives. And so I was very excited to have her as my guest. And so I could not wait for this interview. And she was so excited about it too. So we're getting everything ready. I have all my questions formed and we had been going back and forth. And then suddenly, the day that we were supposed to record, she she broke her toe. She broke her toe. And it was bad. It was really bad. And so the poor thing, so we had to postpone. And I am one of these people who really works well last minute. So I was like, "Oh no, what do I do? I have to pivot really fast." This is one of the downfalls of working last minute. And I've been doing all this reflection during Mercury retrograde, that 3-week cycle that ended on April 25th. I've been doing all of this reflection on just my own thinking patterns and the ways that I could sometimes I have those negative thoughts that come through. And we do everything we can. I have access to an entire panoply of spiritual resources and techniques. And still I was having a very difficult time weeding out some of these self defeating, regretful, resentful thoughts. And so I've been doing a lot of meditation. I made it my Mercury retrograde challenge to continue weeding out those thoughts and to try to gain some understanding for it. And so I've been doing all of this and thinking about manifestation and thinking about like the upcoming election and how to focus my efforts for that. And then Bonnie was like, "I'm so sorry, I can't do it." So, all of this juicy goodness that I have been calling together, the sources of magic, the forces of magic that are out there in the world, all conspired for this moment to happen. And so let's all just take a moment and appreciate that, because some of what I'm going to share with you today is, I think, pretty really it really shifted my perspective and the way that I think about my thoughts. So thank you, Bonnie. And Bonnie will be back on the show. She and I, this is a to be continued. This is like a both and. Yes, we get to do this. And yes, you get to hear this. So let me paint a little picture for you. So we're gonna talk about, we're gonna bookmark that for just a second and get into the manifestation piece in just a second. And there'll be time codes underneath the video if you want to skip right to that. But first, I want to just say that there's an astrological tie into what we're going to be talking about today. And that is that today is May 2nd, Thursday, May 2nd. And we're moving into, we are in the dark of the moon, that balsamic moon phase before the new moon that takes place on the 7th. So the lunation cycle is the relationship, the aspect relationship between the sun, the moon, and the earth, and the sun and the moon in particular. And that represents the cycle of the moon and the sun and their journey together every 28 or so days gives us a real, like a symbolic reference point for understanding different aspects of our own cycles of creation and our own cycles of purging and letting go. And what we have is that when the sun and the moon come together, that is a point of creative energy. And it's actually not creative energy that we can see yet. The sun represents the spirit, which is the conscious will, which is I know what I want, what I desire. And the moon represents the part of us that is unconscious, that is felt and sensed, the intuitive parts of us. And when you have those two parts coming together, you have the creative urge, which is represented by the moon, meeting up with the sun, which is representative of the form that creative urge takes. So, new moons are basically times to set intentions. Then, as the moon and the sun separate over those next few days, we start to see a little bit, like little glimpses of what we're creating, of the intentions that we're setting. Then when the moon is full, it's at its peak energy. And this is the full moon is a time when we can see clearly what we ordinarily can't see. And so this is often a time when we're aware of what we need to let go, of what is holding us back. We can be a little bit more insomniac during these full moon periods. We have a little bit more energy. Things feel really activated. Like we feel like things are possible. And then right after that full moon, we go into the waning moon. And the waning moon is often a time when we're pruning back, we're letting go. We are really preparing ourselves to open up space in our lives for a new beginning. And the most active point of a lunation cycle is those few days, those couple of days when the moon is dark and it's moving toward being new. Because that's when all of our shadow stuff comes up to play. That's when all of what needs to let go and what we need to purge and all that stuff, when we're in a process of sort of like detoxing. And then we start that new moon. So this week has all of that energy. And that new moon on May 7th is in the sign of Taurus. Taurus is a very practical, grounded earth sign. And if you know any Tauruses, you know what I'm talking about. They don't want to talk about your big dreams. They want to talk about, like, what did you have for lunch? What are you doing this weekend? Yeah, and yes, Tauruses can there are some very they're Taurians who are very oriented toward talking about those kind of deeper topics. But there's a framework within a Taurus mentality that is it's about the lived experience in a human body. It's about incarnating, it's about being here on earth and enjoying all of the things that are enjoyable about being on earth. That's Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Venus is that planet that relates to pleasure and beauty. So, this ties in to what we're going to be talking about because when we are in a process of manifestation or when we're in a process of creating our reality or shaping the world that we live in through our thoughts, through our intentions, through our deep heart centered desires, we Venus is very involved in that process. And if we are denying ourselves our pleasure, or we are judging our bodies, our appetites, our sexuality, our femininity, not to limit our gender and into constructs, but if we are denying any of those parts of ourselves, then we're essentially shutting off the receptive nature that allows us to be open to the goodness that's flowing in our lives. And so we need to love our Venus parts, the Venus parts of us that draw toward the roses in the garden, that draw toward relationship with one another, that seek security through an experience of beauty. And this is the framework that we're entering into this week. Now, it's interesting because I'm coming to this conversation all day today. I'm recording this on Saturday, the 27th, and I attended a really cool, inspiring event today called Reframe Ventura County. And I went with a couple of the arts commissioners for our city. And it was just such an incredible event because it was talking about it was talking about the future of the arts and culture in our county. It was talking about the intersection of policy, public policy, and art. And in this workshop today, I was reminded of all the different ways that art and culture and beauty are integral to the health and happiness and well-being and economic stability of our communities. And this and so this lunation this week, it really asks us to open up those creative centers within ourselves. The Sabian symbol is a new continent rising out of the ocean, the surge of new potentiality after the crisis. Ah, beautiful is that. It is really an invitation for us to lean in toward the aspects of our minds and our personal lives that are not capitalistic, that are not looking for a value in everything that we do or an economic value in everything we do, but that are all about really nourishing our hearts and nourishing our spirits and the aspects of ourselves that go underrepresented. And so I'm tying that into this conversation that I was part of today about the arts, because one of the things that we were talking about is how the arts is just not funded, and we need more funding. And artists are having a really difficult time affording to live in our community. And so we need to provide for artists. And if we don't value art, then it's basically reinforcing this idea that any aspect of ourselves that is personal, that is heart centered, that is relational, that is creative just for the sake of making and expressing, that doesn't matter either. But we can't be full humans. We can't have manifestation power if we are not honoring those parts of ourselves, if we are not caring for the parts of ourselves that are standing up and saying, "Hey, I made this." Like I think about little children, like handing you the pictures that they draw and having you put them on the refrigerator. Like, "Hey, look what I did." We all have that part inside of us that urges to be known and be seen, and that is the part that is drawing to itself experiences, truth, life, in addition to the part of us that is known, that is the unconscious, and the unconscious manifests as much, if not more, than the conscious part of ourselves. And if we don't pay attention to the artist inside of us, even if you don't paint or make any kind of art, even if you don't think of yourself as an artist, if you don't pay attention to the inner voice inside of you that says, "Hey, I'm here," then it's going to be very difficult for you to feel fulfilled in anything that you are drawing into your life. And I would even go so far as to say it would be very difficult for you to manifest your desires or your intentions. And so that's a good segue to the manifestation process. So many of you know that your thoughts create and shape your reality. If this is a new concept for you, then sit with it for a few moments, or I'd be happy to share some references for you or some resources for you to help you to gain more awareness about what we're talking about. But we've been working with universal law. There have been books that have been written about it. I think one of the first that came into my awareness was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And then after that, there were a lot of different spiritualists and theosophists and people that were writing about this in the 1800s, the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then The Secret came out in about 2006, I think it was, 2007. And What the Bleep We Know Do We Know came out on became a Netflix streamer. And so we've had these documentaries, we've had these books that have reached pretty good mainstream level. And now this is an idea that we've come to adopt and come to accept, generally speaking. And so the basis of this universal law that we're talking about is the law of cause and effect. That which you reap, so shall you sow. It's the law of attraction. Like energy attracts like energy. And these are what we call universal laws. There's an element of truth. They feel true to us, and we can see evidence of them in our lives, of them being true in our lives. So the process of manifestation is you set an intention, and your thoughts shape your reality. It's like our auras are one great big radio tower. So manifestation, in a nutshell, works like this. Our thoughts, but really our emotions, are like energy, like signals, like a radio signal that we send out in our energy fields or our auras. And that signal gets picked up by other like signals. And so our bodies have this electromagnetic field, they have this energy field, this aura, and our thoughts are like little spiraling little clouds of energy, like little subatomic particles that are swirling around and drawing, magnetizing experiences that validate their truth. And so every little thought that we think gets sent out into this field. The more deeply we feel something, the more energized that thought will be. So the thought on its own is electrical, but the feeling is like the fire, is like the fuel that feeds that thought. So our deep desires, the one that come from our heart, the ones we feel with everything inside of us, those intentions, those thoughts, wow, they really magnetize significant events in our life, significant energy that boomerangs back. Now, when we offer an intention and speak those words up into the heavens, into the heart of the divine, and we put that spiral that thought out into the atmosphere, then suddenly a little rain is going to fall in our lives. And we might have experiences that disappoint us or frustrate us. And that's because we're seeing all of the different ways that our energy is fractured and split. So if we're sending one desire out, but we have a contrasting desire that we're holding, then we have to work within that tension within ourselves. And a lot of times that gets projected out. Let me give you an example. And this one's coming from my own life. So I really wanted to start this podcast. I really wanted to have these kinds of conversations with you. It felt like a really deep desire. I wanted to be in conversations with others who are doing things that I'm impressed by and that amaze me. And so that I was on that track and I was moving in that direction. But there's another part of me that is afraid that I'm gonna say the wrong thing, that's I'll have some internet trolls talking badly about me, that I'll humiliate myself, and so there's another part of me that's like, "Oh, hell no, I am shutting this down." And so, we get right up to the day that I am supposed to record my first episode with my wife, and one thing after another, difficult, bad things were happening. It was like we were late. There was like I had like an eruption in the city. Like there, like an eruption, like a hot topic issue that I was dealing with. There, I wasn't ready in time. There were a cascade of problems that happened the day that we were set to record. I got stuck in traffic. I mean, just one thing after another, and and the part of me that was like, "I gotta shut this down. This is not safe." That part of me was drawing experiences that would allow me to shut it all down. I also had technical challenges too. And so I could recognize that, okay, there is this part of me that is scared. And there's another part of me that knows that I have to, that for some reason, my soul really wants to do this. My heart really wants to do this. My mind really wants to do this. And so I kept moving forward. And we ended up recording later that night. All the technical challenges lifted. Everything came together. Think about how many times in your life you have had a really deep desire. You have wanted something so bad that it like burned in your heart. And as soon as you get right up to the moment of it's going to happen, things seem to fall apart is important because when we are going to do anything like that stretches us out of our comfort zone, like starting an exercise routine, writing a book, launching a show, starting a business, when we do anything that up levels us and takes us to a new state of consciousness, our ego, which is very comfortable in being in the normal routine of our day-to-day lives, of maintaining the relationships that give a sense of tribal identity, of feeling special, feeling like I know I know what my day is going to look like tomorrow. That ego part of us has to basically be anesthetized. It has to relax enough to allow us to up level. And then as soon as we get to another level and we're in that expanded state, then the ego has to adjust to that new normal. But there's a transition period that's really uncomfortable for the part of us that needs stability and safety. And so what tends to happen And this is a part of the process that a lot of people don't talk about, but I'm giving you my this is a you heard it here first. So what tends to happen is that we have an experience that takes all of our focus and all of our attention. Sometimes it's a little dramatic. Sometimes it is like frustration or it's an emotion, a really deep emotion. Sometimes it is depression. Sometimes it is, I'm so busy, I don't know what to do with myself. And that distraction ties us just enough so that we can push beyond our comfort zone and go to that expanded state. But we have a choice in those moments. And that choice is, am I going to allow this to defeat me and to call it a day, or am I going to see this as fuel, allow it to propel me forward? And so you might notice that right before a big event, I see this a lot with my clients who are engaged, and right before their wedding day, they have a big eruption. And it's like there's a huge fight, or there's something that really comes in the form of a lot of resistance. And there's that decision of, am I going to get married? Am I going to stay or am I going to go? Is this the right decision? Is this the wrong decision? And then the marriage happens and it's this beautiful sacred moment, and all of the chaos surrounding it was like an energy that keeps you going forward. Sometimes we do need a choice point. Sometimes the best decision is to not go forward or is to take a pause or take a step back. And so that can be another outcome or another way this presents itself. But, if you notice a pattern where something really dramatic happens or something takes your focus right before something really major and exciting and an attention comes to fruition, then that's what's happening. You are literally being anesthetized while you're going through this growth period, this uncomfortable growth period. Your ego is getting quiet to allow your heart and your soul to carry you through and carry you forward. Now, let's take this and let's talk about. Oh, and one thing too, I'll just add as a punctuation point to this. Part of this distraction happens because ultimately it's the letting go of the desire. It's like this such a weird thing. It's like we feel this desire. We feel it, we feel it, we feel it. We're thinking about it. We're thinking about, I need a new car. I want a new car. I want a new car. Oh, I want this car. I want this car. We're thinking about it and thinking about it. And then, or sometimes it's not a physical, tangible thing. Sometimes it is, I long to find my purpose. I feel like there's something I'm born to do and I can't put my finger on what it is. I want to know. And that's an intention too. Like, I want to know, I want to heal. Um, and so I lost my train of thought. so those so we think and we feel and we're sending a lot of that desire out. We're sending that, filling our energy fields, we're sending that desire out through the radio tower and into the world, in anticipation of that radio tower picking up a signal and bringing that desire to fruition. But as long as it's held in our energy field as a desire, then all we can attract with that magnetic energy is the longing for it. It's not until we let go, let that intention, that desire spiral out into the field. The field is this, field of potentiality. It's not until we allow that to just really spiral out and leave our energy bodies, our auras, ourselves, that energy can come back in return. Because then we're no longer attracting want and longing and desire. Then we're attracting the thing itself. And that happens most smoothly when our ego gets out of the way, when we're not afraid that it won't happen or we're not disappointed that it hasn't happened. That happens a lot of times when we put all of our focus into something else. so much so that we are not even thinking about the other thing. And that moment, those experiences that we have right before something incredible happens, that is the that is and so those experiences we have that are a little chaotic or that pull all of our focus right before something incredible comes to fruition in our lives, that is an important part of the process. That's what clears the space and opens the energy for something new. Very often, if you track this, if you get a really good moon calendar, or Llewellyn has a pocket astrological calendar, or many apps have a moon calendar, if you follow this on a lunation cycle, you might notice that right around the time of the balsamic moon, right before that new moon, that you go through this process in a little way. Now let's take that concept and expand it beyond our personal lives and look at the intentions that we hold for what's taking place in the world or the country or a community or your business. Right now, we are in a critical juncture. We are in a transition point. And this is the point. We're coming to the end of a cycle, the end of a presidential term here in this country. We're coming to the end of a Neptune cycle and a Saturn cycle, a Uranus cycle. Over the next 2 years, there's a lot of endings and beginnings. And so we are all a part of the field of potentiality. We are all creating that future that's coming. And so we need to think and know that each thought that we think, each feeling that we feel is either a jewel adding to the richness and enriching the field, or it's a vacuum sucking energy into a void. And if we're really down about particular candidate, or we're thinking about all the problems in the world, then what we're doing is that we're sucking some of that energy of the field into a void. And so we need to be enriching the field with everything we're doing. There are lots of influences beyond our control that that are sort of working in a coordinated effort that are using this sacred knowledge that we're talking about today to benefit the few at the expense of the many. And each one of us has a responsibility to add to the field. And that doesn't mean just like thinking positive thoughts and denying the reality of those who are suffering or of the injustices or the things that are out of balance. No, we need to be balancing the vision holding and the vision keeping and the vision making and the dreaming that we're doing for the way that our world, the future of our world, we need to be balancing that with our activism and with ways that we're participating in the changes in our communities and in the world. But the whole and so I think each one of us, we can own some responsibility for the ways in which we are contributing to the field. No, we really do have a lot of power. I know this just from my position as an elected member of our council that anytime someone sends a public communications, I am paying attention and I along with my colleagues and others I know who are serving in local positions, we really do take that to heart and for reasons not just because of winning the next election. It is there are many of us, many of our electeds who really want to do this, who really want to do this for the community. And so each one of us has a responsibility. The thoughts we're thinking about ourselves are not just being thought in isolation. This was like my big aha during Mercury retrograde. And so I have some self-judgment loops and I have some thoughts, some unproductive, unhelpful thoughts about not being enough or not being good enough or not having we all do we all can get into those loops. But my big aha was that when I'm in that loop, that my it's not just me that I am affecting or that negative thought loop is affecting. That thought is a part of a field. And so each one of us is doing that, is contributing to the field in our own lives, through our own thoughts, through our own desires. And so this is an invitation to be very mindful about the thoughts you're thinking with regard to our political circumstances in this country, with regard to war and peace and some of the challenges that you're witnessing in your community or in your world. We have the ability to shape the direction of our culture and of our world. And if you don't feel like you can do anything because you're busy, because you have children, because your life is really full, if you don't feel like you have bandwidth to get out there on the picket lines or to take the time to meet with your representatives, then what you can do is every night hold a vision in that excited, energized place of what you want the world to look like for your children, for your future generations, for yourself. And so let's do an exercise together. And I teach this in my magic class. And this is one of my favorite things to teach in my magic class. And speaking of which, I actually am teaching this magic class, a whole workshop from September 2nd to 6th in New York at the Omega Institute. And we do lots of practices like this. But let's all do this together. And this is the way that I like to work with intention and that I like to teach intention setting. And okay, so put all take a few deep breaths, bringing all of your awareness into your heart. And go ahead and give your heart a little smile right now. And maybe your mind is full because we've been talking. Maybe you're driving or doing other things, but just you no matter what you're doing, just stop and smile at your heart center. And now think about the world. And you might even visualize, if you're a visual person, you might even visualize our beautiful Earth, our wonderful, magical planet that supports and nourishes us and provides everything we need, that's got our personality and lets us know when she's upset and lets us know when she's happy and shows us flowers. Think about that beautiful Earth. And now, if you're a visual person, pan back and see the Earth from space. Maybe from the perspective of the moon, see a vision of the earth. And if you're not a visual person, if you're more of a clairsentient or a touchy feely person, really feel your body and your weight grounded on the earth and make a connection with the earth, either through the soles of your feet or through your sitting bones if you're sitting. And now, if you're a visual, visualize that you are going down to the earth and find a place where you would like to bring some light. Feel it in your body. And now smile at your heart and take a few deep breaths and allow your heart to lift an intention into your awareness, into your mind, into your thoughts. Let that intention come from your heart. And here's the thing about the heart speaks in very clear and simple words, and the heart resonates in pictures and images. And so you might have a vision of what represents your desire for the earth. Maybe it's peace, maybe it's a peace sign, maybe it's equality and the equal sign. So just allow that intention to rise up from your heart. And it helps to get excited about it. It helps to feel into it. And it just feels better to do this practice It feels better to do this practice and hold that hope and that possibility and that dream. It feels better to do that than it does to focus on the problems. Because when we focus on the problems, what we're doing is we're drawing a lot of energy to the problems. And when we draw energy to something, then we are basically giving it fuel. And the more you give something fuel, the more it's going to explode. So, so over the next week or so, while we're moving into the dark of the moon, and as we're moving into the new moon, and Jupiter is closing its cycle in Taurus, getting ready to enter Gemini on the 25th, there is a lot of visioning power that we have individually and as groups. And so I'm going to leave you with this with this message, and that is that we really could. And so I'm going to leave you with a message. When I say we're responsible for the future of the world and for the world that we are living in, what I mean is that we can't afford to sit idly by and watch as our field, as our collective thought and potential is in the same place that it's been, maintaining its status quo. That we have to do all that we can in our everyday lives to exercise restraint in the way that we succumb to hateful, abusive, depressed, or shameful thoughts. And instead, let's tell different stories of praise and gratitude and joy and connection. Praise is such a strong vibration. When you hear it, it reverberates all throughout you like joy, but it's like joy with purpose. And gratitude is another feeling that holds that brightens up the field, that holds a high vibration. And praise celebrates the relationship between the individual and the source. It helps us to praise is the energy that celebrates the relationship between ourselves, our personal lives, individuals, and the source, the divine, that unseen force. Praise links the visible and the invisible. It's a unifying principle. And this is the thing that we can do in addition to all the things that you're doing to be involved, all in addition to your activism, shifting the consciousness of the planet is crucial at this time. Praise is a vibration that's exponentially more resourceful than gratitude. Gratitude is really appropriate for calming our mind, for getting us out of a negative loop. But praise is something even more potent. Praise connects the seen and the unseen, the visible and the invisible, the individual and the source. And so when we move away from despair toward praise, away from from disappointment toward praise, what we're doing is that we're filling the field with that. Praise is a vibration that's exponentially more resourceful than gratitude. Gratitude is really appropriate if we're trying to get out of a negative thought loop. It's appropriate for easing the mind, but praise expands the heart. It celebrates the relationship between the individual and the source, the visible and the invisible. And it's a unifying principle. Because how many of have you ever, if you ever have sung in a choir or sung in a group or sung in a car with a friend, then you know that you can't, there's no space for despair when you're lifting your voice in praise. And so, if there's one thing that we can do, maybe you're not involved in any kind of activist movement, or maybe you don't want to think about that, or you're too busy. The one thing you can do to improve the world and the state of the world right now is to really be mindful of the thoughts that you're thinking and the feelings that you're feeling and lean into that which brings you joy. So I want to thank you for listening. And there's, I feel like this is an ongoing conversation. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear your thoughts. So please come to the rachellangshow.com and share with us. Or you can post comments underneath the YouTube video. What do you think? What has worked for you with manifestation? In what ways do you let go of this? So I want to hear from you. I want this conversation. So this is a conversation that is hopefully planting some seeds of ideas in your mind. And this is an ongoing conversation that I hope we get to have because as we move forward toward November, we are really going to we're really going to need all of us participating in elevating the consciousness of our culture, of our field, so to speak. So let's keep the conversation going. What are your thoughts? What are your questions? What do you have to say? Go to the rachellangshow.com. That's where you can leave your feedback or leave your questions or your comments, or find me through email or Instagram or any one of those social media platforms. Yeah, I'd love to hear from you. And there are lots and lots of ways that we can keep this conversation going. One is I have a membership, the rachellangshow.com, and you can be a part of our planetary progressives. We have monthly conversations all about this, and we actually have activations, and we do work very specifically with magic, with ritual, and with the manifestation process. And if you want an even deeper experience, join me at the Omega Institute on September 2nd through the 6th. And I have a workshop called Modern Day Magic. And that is going to be an intensive working with desire, finding out where our fears are, what stands in our way, and also giving you some real practical ways to work with magic in your everyday life. So thank you, thank you, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. And hopefully, if everything goes well, I'll be back with Bonnie next time or the time after. We still have to schedule it, but Bonnie will be back. So thank you all, and we'll see you next time.